Okay, this is a personal recording and a personal log of my, let's say, my voice diary, my personal diary. So, I mean, maybe I'm making strange connections. Maybe things are similar to this. I remember doing the Uchiha practice of, I don't even know what it's called in the anime, I can't remember, but the one that awakens the Sharingan, the three, the three-spoked Sharingan. No, it's not. No, it's actually something more advanced than that. It's the thing where you encapsulate the judgment of another person and you can actually reliably simulate it or emulate it with inside you. And based on that intimate connection and that emulation of that instant connection, you essentially have a kind of. You don't have their soul, but you have the judgment, the true judgment from their soul. In some sense, it can only work in such a way that even between the two that there is truth to be found. So you get a kind of a God, where two or more are gathered in my name. That's the sort of, so it has to, the in the name thing is the piece that's missing from most other people. You can't just team up with someone and come up with a good idea. You have to team up with someone in the name of and in the name of God is not obviously granted or something like that. Anyway, so kind of already have to be within the mantle of the Holy Ghost. Anyway, so this, I think what I did was, and now this might be a speculation, but Daniela, I wonder if it was her, because she had a very similar, obviously, but her being feminine and or her being a woman or a girl and me being a boy. And maybe I've used this to color my whole view of gender relations, because I've always considered that the masculine is more opportunely capable of understanding the feminine, and that also echoes with the worldly culture that, sort of what do women want, and men are, but men and women play this game, they even call it the game. So I think that there is a worldly game in which we pretend that the masculine is supposed to understand the feminine, and therefore it's this kind of cat and mouse sort of game. Although, no, that's not the right kind of way to describe the game, because it's more like uh, there's no analogy that I can clearly think, but it's almost like the woman is tactically retreating to entice the man to pursue. And so there's a kind of magnetic induction. But anyway, I was discussing that with somebody else recently, but and I elaborated it quite well, but it's going to be too much for me to recapitulate it in this log. But the point, though, is that I think that it's not true that men have a better basis to understand women. I think that's not a natural phenomena. That is, I think, a worldly phenomena. It's interesting, although in the scripture it is essentially referred to as a natural phenomena, at least in the evangelical uh, pronouncement that women are the weaker vessel. But even that does not necessarily, even if you accept that pronouncement, it does not follow from that men are more easily capable of understanding women than women are of understanding men. I still think that that is a worldly. It's not a natural thing, it's a worldly thing. And so this comes into this very important spiritual problem. Do you, like I always, when I come across people who I think are sort of destroying the Holy Spirit because they are using it without a mind for the Holy Ghost, and so they're just kind of drunkards, they're just kind of inebriated uh, charlatans and fools and pretenders and all these sorts of, they think they know something and therefore they have something to use as a wedge to play their silly games and bullshit, because they won't accept proper teaching because they've already been misled, and they're very thankful for the misleading that they have received. They are very grateful for the service being provided to them by the false prophet, and they have no higher appreciation for proper teaching. In fact, if anyone reveals to them that they have something to be taught, they can only play games. Because they still want to be considered as equals, while they are lying in the darkness. And there's probably some other scripture that I can repurpose, like going to people's doors like a cat, like a cat in heat, the Cain and Abel kind of, that they are in the moment of envy, jealousy, worldly projection onto nature, worldly projections onto nature, masculine and feminine confusions and I think it is based on this worldly notion that men can understand women more so than women can understand men, which I don't think is a natural thing. It's a worldly thing that was enculturated in culture, in a corrupted culture. And I think that basic asymmetry, does mean that, women do have to be held to a higher account, but men don't like to do that, because then it's harder to pry, it's harder to get them to intrigue and seduce, it's harder to live in the imagination of a little girl. So in some sense, I think that, because a very common form of mental insanity or pathological insanity in some sense is premised on the gullibility of a little girl, or the imagination of a little girl. And I don't think little girls are more gullible than little boys, but because of many, many, many factors, but because essentially it seems like a good lowest common denominator resolution to the issue that, well, you can, instead of having a relationship that has real integrity, or that really has grounding, and that people have actual values that are worth their salt, or they're actually coherent, or things align up and you can actually test them and you can improve them based on talking, because everything's on the up and up, everything's above board, everything's on the square. We can actually talk things through. They're saying, no, we don't want to talk things through. We don't want to understand. We don't want true knowledge. In fact, we have our competition instead. We have our symbols. We have our darkness, our ignorance. We have something instead of it. And if you try to displace that, we'll be fearful of it, right? Okay, so they have their metrics, and they're not willing to admit that they were sort of man-made metrics that were made corruptly as well. They were made in contradistinction to the true teaching, but that's lost in history, so they can be forgiven that, and they can just basically say, well, no one knows, no one can know, so, in this agnosticism, we can do what we wish, we can do as we will, and that's good enough for them. And yeah, so they just they start with no integrity and they proceed from the presupposition of no integrity, and that's where they lie, and that where they sit in their strangely lukewarm pretension of righteousness and pretense and pretending. The word, I remember Sargon Akkad, when he used to use the word pretentious a lot, he called me pretentious like 10 times. And he didn't really know me that well, but just on prejudging me, he called me pretentious many, many times. I never argued with him. I never said I take issue with. I did opine in one of my responses and discourse with him that you've labeled me many times, and I was giving him a philosophical primer about people that just kind of label other people. So I sidestepped the argument, or I would say that I didn't engage in the argument. I think probably I did reveal to him that implicitly that I thought that, you know, that his judgment on calling me pretentious is, I mean, I guess I didn't fully understand it as well, so that's what I sort of said. So I mean, I guess I could have said, oh well, I reject your labeling of me, but I just kind of did it as a sort of water off a duck's back. And then I, you know, put it, I even sort of, perhaps I verbally tabled it as, okay, well, you know, maybe that's something to discuss at some point if you have the time. I think that was the first response that I gave to him. I said, okay, you've called me pretentious, and I, I, I don't exactly know what you mean by that. And then I think he did elaborate, and I said, well, you know, I still, you know, I think I kind of evaded and avoided. No, I don't think I was evasive, though. I do think, I mean, implicitly I was displeased by it, but I was diplomatically taking issue with it, but I didn't do it in an argumentative way. I don't think my diplomacy was at fault. I don't think I was being Luciferian. I think I was somewhat being tactful. I did tell other people immediately, other people that were giving me more time. I spoke to them about it, about the exchange that Sargon. I mean, this was on some kind of, I don't remember. I think it was the thing that existed before Discord. I think it was called something else. I can't even remember what it was called. Maybe it was Twitch, or it was some version. It wasn't Ventrilo. I know it was like, maybe it was TeamSpeak. Maybe it was like TeamSpeak 2.0 or something, but it might have been TeamSpeak. I can't remember. Anyway, or it was sort of in the days when. Anyway, I remember it looked more like Discord than it looked like Ventrilo. That's what I remember. I mean, I've been using voice discussion apps for since they pretty much. I mean, I even think I was part of inventing anyway. And I didn't even know who Sargon was. Even when he was talking to me, I knew that the people cared. I mean, I can't remember. It was like maybe it was a group. It was a voice chat that I got access to by talking to somebody else on another voice chat. And I think that I was in a zeitgeist kind of. You know, there were zeitgeist discussion groups on these voice things, or maybe there was another guy that was like Zeitgeist. What was it called? You know, this famous architect sort of guy who was designing future city designers and things like that. And he was, it was almost like a kind of primordial TED talk, so a primordial, like these futurist kind of people. I can't remember what he was called, but he's got a French name, I think, and he's sort of respected. And he was, man, I can't remember what he had like a famous documentary about his ideas, essentially, which is obviously kind of more inspiring perhaps because it's a symbol of, sort of how you can have a technocracy to solve problems, essentially how you can have fair systems. But the problem is that you need a kind of psychological cultural consciousness to dovetail with that, and that really is the problem, is the human condition, not really in, pragmatically everything is capable of being solved from a kind of top-down amoral. The problem is that basically that's not good enough. You need to actually, some people don't just want to some people, like rich people, they just want to have good value for money. When rich people spend their money, generally speaking, they want good, well, at least, I mean, obviously people are different. I mean, I guess if you have enough money, you can just make yourself poor or you can throw it away. I like to actually do the inverse. I don't, so I mean, I guess a lot of people do waste their money when they have a lot of money. Maybe that's the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Maybe the wealthy always demand value for their money, or that they sometimes do splash out as well when they have a kind of excess money. I'm relatively speaking quite poor, but I like to say to myself, I like to consume like a rich person, which is like, I will experiment with things. I will try to use an inordinate amount of my income to buy something so that I can know what it's like to have it in abundance, so that I can actually see what its effects are and how good it is or how bad it is, or what the value of it really is, relative to the other things, that I have, that I would want to consume potentially. So I'm trying to learn about what's good and what's not good, at least relative to my biology. But I do think that these things are actually generally more generalizable, and obviously there are some important differences between different functions of maybe blood type and things like that. But anyway, my point is that I do think that if everyone consumed like I did, we would all be in a better place, because I try to find the things that I want, and then I try to work out if I can make them myself. Like, so the things that I want usually are high quality, they're usually efficacious, they're usually very, very good. And then I want to grow it myself if I can. I want to cultivate it, I want to make a garden of it, or I want to work out, what in it is making it work, so that I can kind of propagate it more effectively, so that I don't have to have so many procedural steps, because some things would just be impossible to make myself. If it doesn't grow from a plant, then and it comes from a mechanical process, then you actually have to be a mechanical engineer, or maybe, in fact, the mechanical stuff is the easy thing. It's really the chemical stuff that's chemistry, materials chemistry, complex metallurgy, refinement of materials in order to, you need like a full chemical lab, material lab, and those things. There's probably no such thing as a full materials lab, because it's so varied. I wonder. Anyway, there's so much potential spectrum of things, but maybe you can have a tool shop that can help you make anything. That I've always wanted, that a kind of multi-purpose laboratory that could sort of build any production you need to be able to make manufacturing components that if you could just make manufacturing, if you could make any manufacturing component, then you can make anything, if you can kind of see what I'm saying there, and you have the knowledge also to make any manufacturing component, then you also have the knowledge to make anything as well. So it's kind of the one subsumes the other in some sense. Anyway, so I'm kind of interested in that kind of stuff. But anyway, but when I say I'm interested in that kind of stuff as the after effect of wanting to consume like a rich person, because there's no point in wanting something that isn't any good for you. So I want to know what I want first, and then I want to know how to make what I want. So that would be what I want in general. So, so when I consume things, I try to tell people afterwards, if I try, because I've believed that I've really experienced it, and I know what it feels like, and I know what it's like inside my biology and all those sorts of things, if it's a consumable at least, or if it's a wearable or something like that, I think I'm a pretty good judge of those things. So then I tell people, do this, don't do that, avoid this, eat that, take this, don't take that, that's sort of my... So I think if everybody else was as good as me, or had a good enough sensibility as me, and they broadcast that, then everyone else would be better, off. So one person goes and buys a whole lot of this. Like, I spent an inordinate amount of my salary on buying, blueberries and strawberries, which then I used as ingredients for all the shakes that I used in a month. And somebody else should really get the door. There's somebody else here. It's not Saturday, is it? No, it's Friday. Oh, but it's a public holiday. Oh, damn it. Damn, my recording's going to be interrupted now. I've completely lost my flow of content. Okay, let me see if I can try to finish this off quickly before I get interrupted. What was I generally talking about? I was talking about natural problems versus worldly problems, and talking about the issue or the gap between men and women, and let's say the lower expectations that women are usually exposed to in order to extend their empathy, but essentially how that's also given over to them because they are sort of the childish, they are meant to deal with children, and therefore they have to kind of maybe be closer to being childish themselves so that they can outgame the child's games. but then also women, I think, can sort of develop this into a kind of sickness where they can not actually release the child from childhood. So they kind of take revenge on the fact that they've been treated as the childish sex. And so there's a kind of, it's interesting how, sort of, especially when you look at, what's his name? The Critical Drinker made a beautiful 10-minute video about, sort of how the modern movies all have corrupt moral messages inside of them. And essentially, if you swapped the sexes of the main characters around, everyone would consider those movies to be evil, stupid, villainous movies, where essentially the main person in the film, but for them being a woman, would essentially be a bad person, would be obviously seen by the audience and rejected as being like a movie that glorifies an evil person. But because the main character is a woman, they are just given given a free pass. They can do villainous things, and they are still considered as the good people, which I actually think is a beautiful thing that Hollywood is doing that, because it's actually lifting the skirt on. See, isn't that a beautiful figurative way of putting it? On the foul deeds of women, and how culturally they are given. In some sense, we're giving center stage to the fact that women are judged in a literally double standard. There is a double standard for women. The moral, ethical bar is much lower for women. So we should celebrate that Hollywood is making this accessible to the culture, because we've never put it on a pedestal. And so it's a good reflection, it's a good mirror of what happens in culture, which is kind of the dirty little secret that all the games are played around. And so, obviously some women have doubled down into this, and they have been a part of celebrating this. And obviously those are just very low caste women. And when I say caste, I mean that in the sense of the original Hindu religious kind of framework, that these are deplorable, lowly people. They have putrid souls. They are disgusting human beings. They are reprobates. And then many men have even normalized this disgusting, it's kind of like sycophancy, so there's a whole industry of men who are essentially sycophants, who are miscreants themselves, who are, usually these are people that are very self-loathing, and then they've redirected that self-loathing into trying to take down the world. They want the world to burn because they are so jealous. You see, that's even the wrong word. They're so envious of people who are taller than them, or who have something that they don't. Right? So these are people with natural problems that are trying to convert their natural problem, as they see it, into a worldly gripe, into a ruckus. They're trying to create a ruckus to disguise their foul self-loathing, which is essentially the impetus and their excuse for giving their life a purpose, to sort of take revenge on the world. Continuing on from my personal log, continuing the personal log. So I think maybe I'm way off here. INFJs are very interesting. At least the INFJ that I'm typing is a metatype 13, which in my system, I think they take the metagram title that I gave them was Lonely 4, which is actually a bit of a relic of my own naming convention, because they don't actually have a lonely emotional tone in their circuitry, but I kept the naming convention because it was too much to keep on revising it. But they actually have sad. Sad is their emotional tone that's connected with their primary counter offer, I believe. Because they are named after, all the names are originally named after their, it's interesting, the naming convention might actually have some treasure hidden in it, because the original naming convention was obviously, I hadn't settled on what emotional tone should be defined as what. And I was probably at the same time dealing with the problem of normativity, because who should be the judge of how I could define an emotional tone? And sort of at the same time I was probably processing the huge meta-ethical conundrum that entails, which is, sort of, because it is difficult because of egregores, essentially, which is, to explain it, that everyone's unconscious side of the mind is going to be somebody else's, some other side of the mind, like a within multiples of 4, so I'm a metatype 13, so a metatype 9 is going to have their unconscious side of the mind is going to be my, let me not fuck this up, if metatype 9 would mean that their unconscious is further to the right of mine, which means that basically my subconscious is their, so a metatype 9's unconscious is the same as my subconscious. So when I'm looking at them, I'm projecting my subconscious onto into how they're relating to their, so if I'm going to empathize with them, my subconscious is their unconscious, and their unconscious is my subconscious. So we have a kind of egregoric relatability, if you see the invention of this word, egregore. And so therefore, everyone's unconscious side of the mind is somebody else's something else's, right? Which means that there are special affinities, and this is what gives rise to quadra. But the quadra don't actually work perfectly because there aren't an even number of metatypes. There are an odd number of metatypes. There are 17. So there isn't a symmetry here. It does lean in one direction, and that leaning in some sense means that there is a resolution to the issue of normativity from a structural indication, but you can't from the structural indication derive what the answer is. Okay, so I'm just making that technical point here. But then this is also what makes the illusion of Maya, consciousness, karma, the world. This is what makes worldly things problematic, because some person's experience of the world is somebody else's heaven, literally, because their superego would be their heaven, and what they are doing in their heaven, to their heaven. What they do on the earth is reflected in their heaven, above their head. And in some sense, this is also a collective thing that we can, let's say, finds a connection to one another through the world, right? So we need to find a way to disambiguate ourselves from the world so that we can properly replenish the earth, so that we can be good stewards of nature and properly administer our nature and our earthly concerns in a way that is integrated with our heaven, or with the heavens, right? But we have to do this through the filter of egregoric conflation and convolution and connotation and association, and also, so using the metaphor of the alchemical metaphor, which was the original source of the words that we used in our physics tech, in our exploration into techne and technology and theory of modeling physical regularity, because you can't really say that you understand the physical realm, because what are you talking about if you don't have a full explanation? There's a difference between explanation and description, right? And so, when you're being discursive about description, you're sort of creating an amoral Pandora's box that you know not what they do, forgive them for they know not what they do, as they, when they don't have a mind for what they're doing in morality, when they don't have a mind for what they don't know and what they should know perhaps, and perhaps that hasn't even crossed their mind, they think that their intentions are good enough. Maybe. How? By loving the darkness, by reconciling themselves with the ignorance that they have. They have settled themselves. Have they attached themselves? Or are they doing it as an experiment so that they can clean themselves up afterwards? So do they still hold themselves open to the fact that they have misstepped and that they have not made even a mistake but have made an error? Do they hold that open to themselves, because if they don't wish to judge themselves, but at the same time, then if they have no judgment in the world, I mean, one cannot live without judgment, without discerning, without understanding, unless you are a beast, unless you are purely conditioned and you're just told what to do, and you were never taught the teaching, and you never inclined yourself to sound teaching and sound doctrine, but instead invented your own, because there is no such thing as someone who is doctrineless. They are doctrinally inclinated in some sense, and you can say that that is a projection, and if you say that to me and you use language to say it to me, then you're not worth talking to. In fact, you're a fucking retard, and really, stop wasting my time. And you know, there are people, look, please, when I say retard there, I mean it in the proper sense of the word. You know, people who actually have natural problems that they cannot think through things are not retarded in the sense that, I mean, or they're naturally retarded, but I'm talking about, I guess, people who are spiritually retarded, who are ethically retarded. They are, which is obviously the thing that is worth talking about, is talking about ethics, because you can expect people to have a higher ethical level. You can't expect them to be naturally pure, you know, if they have a natural problem. But you can expect people, I think, you can expect to judge them spiritually. I mean, that's what the discerning spirit allows. You know, this people who have these very superficial readings of doctrine, and they come up with these stupid, retarded interpretations of scripture that they have no qualification or business reading, because they're just misleading themselves as they themselves have been misled by false teachers and false doctrine peddlers, all fueled by the false prophet, which, you know, I guess you could say, maybe you could say, forgive them for they know not what they do. When they are so impatient and uncareful and sullen and insolent and indolent. You know, sort of a perfect trifecta of self-impelling retardation. So when I say retardation, I really do mean it with the vitriol or the cursing tone. You think an apostle can't curse? You think an apostle cannot condemn and rebuke and generates judgment? The Spirit of the Lord is the spirit of judgment and knowledge and understanding. Anyway, okay, so obviously, you know, if you're enculturated to a group of people who in some sense are always just looking for some algorithmic heuristic instead, they're trying to map all the heuristics, well, you know, that's not so bad. You know, that's called being a juvenile, you know, that you're trying to sail the seas and you're trying to work out the content of the salt in the ocean. You know, you're trying to work out, you know, on the back of your hand. You know, you just want to roughly know what the territory is, what the scope of the, you know, what the scope of the unfinished business in the collective unconscious, or something like that. Or, you know, you're I mean, in some sense, you're maybe toying with the idea of where do there be terra incognito that disguises the visage of the dragons, the realm of the dragons, the realm of the magnificent, the realm of the scarlet dragon. You know, where is the source of mystification that I feel inside myself as I am mystified in myself to explore and discover the terra incognito, the curiosity, the intrigue, the many mysteries, until we actually get the inclination to solve the mystery, that the mystery of God shall even be finished, it says in Revelation. And the mystery of God shall be finished. I think I've actually slightly misquoted it there, but I think it's not an incorrect paraphrasing. I mean, I could actually find it. I mean, do I really have to do that? Shall I interrupt myself to go find the exact wording, because someone's going to say that in Revelations it says that if you change one word in Revelations, then you will be cursed, right? If you misquote one word, you know? Well, people have so many, how many different how many different translations of the Bible even fucking exist? You know, never mind that the translations don't even agree with each other. You know, but if you alter the text, then someone's going to jump on your back like a fucking retard. When you've quoted it well enough, true enough, for the purpose at hand, and you know, if it was actually, if you go and look it up, let's say shall be finished. Let me see, shall be finished. If that in the search bar does that, shall be finished. Is this vainglory now that I haven't even continued, that I'm trying to resolve this thing of some, because there's some retard in the work who will jump on my back for this. Here we go, Revelations chapter 10 verse 7. You see how stupid I am. I even say Revelations all the time. I say Revelations when it's actually the book of Revelation, and someone will rake me, some other retard, some old retard with a beard will rake me over the cold for that, because when I say Revelations, what do I mean? You know, am I not also referring to the book of Revelation, but that I'm imparting an understanding when I call it Revelations? Because this is not the revelation to the world. This is the revelation of God that everyone goes through. The description in Revelation is not a world prophecy. It's not about future events. It's about your world. Your world. So when I say Revelations, is there no truth to that? Not truth enough for some retard out there. That's my point. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. So, I mean, who is he? I mean, I can't even remember myself who the he is there. As he hath declared. I mean, wow, you know. I mean, the only he that I like talking about is the he in Genesis, you know. The he, him that made the male and the female. You know, in the beginning... oh no, let me not go there. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So maybe that's the he of the mind. The he of the real understanding. The Christ consciousness, you know, which is obviously, that's the thing that I say is clearly written in the scriptures. If you just read 1 John chapter 4 and chapter 5, very clearly it's Christ consciousness. But anyway, there are lots of other doctrines out there. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but you know, because maybe the he here is just the he who understands the truth, the spirit of truth. And that is a mind, and that mind can be shared by anyone. That mind, you know, you can tie for first place, you know. Maybe everyone can get the gold, you know. The spiritual brethren, the spiritual brotherhood, is that not what the actual doctrine is all about? Loving the brethren. Love for the brethren. But, you know, who are these who don't want to be brethren because they have their own fucking doctrine? They have their own dabbling dalliance. They want to dose you. They're druids, and they want to, you know, when someone goes into somebody else's house, and I mean this as a tribe. I mean this when I say house. I mean this as an analogy of like a group or a tribe, and you don't know what's going on there, and maybe you're not invited. And maybe you're the interloper, you're the outsider, and so the people in the house, right? Maybe some people like you and some people don't like you, and the people who don't like you don't like how you are changing the environment of the social environment for the other people, you know, how you're interfering with their schemes and desires and devices and machinations, and doctrine, and maybe their own understanding of their own doctrine as they lean on their own understanding and are not properly subject to it. You know, all of those sorts of little angles come out of you know, diagnosing this kind of phenomena that we see happening. And then what happens? And then what do we see happening here? then maybe what the Druid does, what they do, right, as a kind of as a way to be priestly, a treacherous little priest of their own teaching, right? And look, it's fine not to know what the true teaching is. Just be humble. I mean, I've gone a lot of my life saying, oh, you know, I think I understand that, but I can't explain it right now, or I have to. If I talk about that, I have to do it through story, or I have to do it through, because you know I have explained that point before, but you know I don't have the mass at hand. I don't have the example at hand, to wit, as they say. You know, so I mean, why not just be transparent about it? Why not just be honest about it, you know, that seems like I don't have the calling, or I don't have the ammunition for that task. You know, I think I think that overshoots my current capacity, or you know, where I am in the midst of working on other things, you know, synchronicity or something like that, or timeousness or something like that, you know. Can we have grace for something? Grace for humility. But I mean, obviously, we're in a world that also is scathing and scornful of those who are properly transparent and humble. You know, there are lots of devious, deviling lusts and envies and jealousies that are in their own cycles of machination. And I mean, I've always tried to wear my faults on my sleeve of the things that I'm trying to process and work out, or they're obviously within some kind of avoidant diplomacy, because you know you don't want to plant the corrupt seed into the field to, you know, make a mess of weeds or something like that. But then in some sense you still have to plant it somewhere, so you try to contain that within yourself, perhaps, so that you don't spread evil, because you know, in some sense, you don't, you know, maybe you have to see the seed sprout before you know if it's good seed or bad seed. You know, judge it by its fruit. You know, maybe there's a season of weeds that makes the earth more fertile in its cycle of horticultural administration or something. Anyway, let me not get too lost into the metaphor, but because also there are ways in which that the natural metaphor is problematic, because you don't know exactly how it should properly translate into the delicate nuance. But anyway, of the things of reason and the things of values and understanding and faith, you know, all of which have to also, I'm relating this to the doctrine and the teaching and the clear water, the pure water. So, you know, can we not realize there are better and worse ways of doing things? And, you know, instead of saying, well, this is good enough, fuck off, we can say, well, this is the best way I know how to do it. You know, can you teach me a better way? Can we be open to a higher understanding, a better understanding? You know, can we be? You know, the world would say, well, anything and everything in answer to can we be. Maybe, no, yes. No, that means yes. Yes, that means no. Maybe that means both yes and no, or either. You know, it's a carnival ride. You know, intrigue and curiosity, void and formless. You know, can we just be honest about the darkness on the face of the deep? Can we be honest about our ignorance? You know, can we not self-report these things? Can we not be aware of our own deficiencies when they're made to us, and then admit them as they are revealed? But obviously, you know, pearls before swine sometimes when you're dealing with people who are vicious and violent and dangerous. And themselves cunning, you know. So I mean, there we have the knot of the world, the Leviathan. Anyway, Man, I was reaching a point and now I've lost my own thread. How embarrassing. Because I skated over it to finish my motif. How vain of me. I don't mean, I'm not admitting that I am vain. I'm admitting that I know that I can be interpreted that way, and that it's a valid interpretation. So I'm really just erring on the side of carefulness, or am I being overly cautious? You know, self-doubt starts the seed of where does that lead me? You know, I mean, now I'm just further into the tangent, which is not where I even wanted to be. I wanted to remember the thread that I lost. I want to pick it back up again and finish it. Okay, so let me go back and focus on that rather than thinking about the self-doubt and meditating on the self-doubt. I mean, that's like staring into the abyss because you're hoping that it's going to start staring back at you. Just that you have somebody else to play with, but in some sense you're just kind of trying to play with yourself in the mirror, you know, in the mirror of your mind. But the mirror is, in fact, there's no such thing. It's actually called the imagination. So you're imagining yourself beyond yourself, inside yourself. You've created a fuck up. I mean, what else can you call it? You know, that I like the word fuck. You know, I think we need an expletive. We need for people to know when they're talking about something that is super serious. That's what, you know, because, and let's just, you know, because otherwise, if we don't have fuck, then I'm going to have to say the word super, 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 super with a tone of voice that is eventually going to strain my voice. So I would rather just cut to the chase and use the word fuck. Can an apostle get some license to swear, please? Thank you very much. Okay? Get the fuck over it. And I mean that. Get the fuck over it. I'm allowed to swear. Get it through your fucking skull if you don't get that yet. You stupid retards out there. Okay? It's that fucking simple. Okay. Swearing aside, that last fucking, that was perhaps a bit, maybe that crossed the line. That was a bit, what's the word? Provocative, I think. I think that was a bit, I think that was perhaps a little bit angry, but it was also ambiguous in some sense. You have to worry about ambiguity sometimes, because ambiguities that are vague and embarrassing, I had this whole construct thinking about vague and embarrassing shit. It's very interesting. You know, that's actually comes from a legal term in pleadings, that you can complain that the other person's, because you see, before in my legal system, which is a much better, proper legal system than other people's systems, when you're doing things in the High Court, you plead your case out before you go before the judge, and the parties plead their case out to each other, and they have to replicate each other's pleadings. Well, that's the tradition in some sense. The judge should not really get involved until both sides have replicated each other's pleadings. If they can't replicate each other's then there's probably other, I don't actually know, but in some sense it's, you know, it is, the system has so much common sense, and let me not use complicated words like common sense perhaps, but it has so much reason and rigor and integrity woven into its structure that, you know, at least, you know, parties are usually capable of replicating each other. If they're not capable of replicating each other, people should actually be cast off the roll. They should not be advocates. If you're not intelligent enough that you can actually replicate pleadings, you're in the wrong industry. You should be, you know, like you're in the wrong vocation. You don't have the intellect or something like that. Or you need to have a bigger legal team. Maybe you have a good legal mind, but you can't deal with that. You know, maybe you can be maybe you could be somebody else's secretary, you know, maybe you understand one thing in the law, but you actually don't have a broad enough intellect to be able to fulfill that role, I would probably say, if you can't replicate pleadings. Because anyone should be able to replicate pleadings, you know. Look, there can be honest mistakes and problems in replicating pleadings, because sometimes situations are just so complicated that they are actually hard to, because in some sense when you go through the issue of replication, you are also refining your own case, because in some sense you're trying to argue the case already. Technically you're not arguing yet, but you're laying out all your claims, you're putting all your ducks in a row. And when you do that, you are wonderfully, I mean, the whole tradition of it is really quite beautiful. It's very ensconced in Christianity, because, you are pleading your case and you're praying for remedy. You pray for remedy. And, a good party, when they receive the other party's pleadings, will perhaps realize that the other person has a good case, and that maybe they should offer settlement. But I mean, obviously this is not always necessarily the case. Sometimes there are questions of fact which are in dispute, and sometimes there are questions of law, both of which is often, I think, useful to have instantiated within precedents. You actually sometimes you want the case to go before the courts, just so that they end up in the record. It's kind of sad perhaps when some cases are settled out of court, and you don't get but this is also the value of oh man, I can't even remember what they're called. Legal no, man, I can't remember. Conventions, judicial conventions, when essentially law would be attempted. The problem is that there's a huge history of legal conventions producing false fruit. And in some sense, this was even known within the legal system, that the reason why we are bad at judicial conventions is because the human condition is not yet ripe for understanding. It hasn't come fully into view, and so we can't stably produce good fruit from judicial conventions. I think that time has somewhat passed since the Constitution has been instantiated. I even think that we actually are in need of a constitutional judicial convention to reassert the constitutional supremacy, which has been bastardized by the corruption of the wicked. Which is also perhaps a historical, useful teething process, because it is a reflection of the moral corruption of the people themselves that participate or fail to participate in the democracy, in the true spirit of, let's say, proper... I have to be careful, because I'm trying to talk about the world, and I'm trying to judge the world, which is kind of a useless thing to do. But essentially, the tough thing about it is that what happens if the reason why the world is messed up is not because of leadership, it's also because of leadership. But in some sense, there's a secret in democracy, right? The secret in democracy is that democracy really is the best system. In a manner of speaking, in some context, democracy is the best system. But the problem with democracy is not the politicians and the leaders of political parties. The problem is with the people. And the problem is broader based, as it were. The leaders that do the right thing aren't leaders for very long, because they don't have subjects, they have constituents. And these constituents are roughly, you could say that, a society is going to be as moral as the gossip in the office around the water cooler. What is the intelligent thing? What is the intelligent opinion? What is the fashionable opinion to have about an intellectual matter around the water cooler in the office? That's basically what democracy is enslaved to. Democracy is enslaved to how intelligent people can discuss politics around the office.
That is how strong your democracy is. How retarded and evil and wicked and stupid the people in the office can discuss a moral issue that involves politics, because they get to vote every 4 or 5 years in most democracies. Now, there is a solution to this, which is that you actually have a legal system that actually, at least is the backbone, that actually is justice, to give some accountability and some containment, right? So you don't have the ruckus of the mob running the asylum, if you'll forgive the mixed metaphor. You know, the ruckus around the water cooler, the mob of groupthink that thinks they can chant something and therefore, you know, they've got a case. That they've never pleaded, they don't understand replication, they couldn't replicate a thing to save their fucking life. They wouldn't be able to replicate a pleading. But they want what they want. And they have the numbers to back them up. And the only thing that I think can stand in their way is a judge and justice, which now has been spoiled in the South African context, but I think that it's perhaps historically useful that it's been spoiled, because it's a reflection of the wicked history that we live in. And when I say wicked history, I mean the history of the present. I mean the people that are alive today, not the things that were done yesterday, but the people that are alive today, and how stupid and evil their intentions are and their beliefs are, how servile, how they disrespect law. They want rights, but they don't know what rights are. They just want what they want, and then they'll use whatever language dignifies them in helping them get what they want. I mean, they're just lustful animals, creatures of desire, Luciferian quislings and flatterers and sycophants. And when this mentality is in a household that has a social structure, and then somebody else comes in and seeks to bring it up into a higher order, into a higher morality, into a higher understanding, to improve standards and improve things, then instead what they do is they can do one of two things. They can give you a nice cup of something to drink, and maybe there's something poisoned in it. You know, there's something that's just to give you a bad feeling, just to give you just to ward you off, just to give you a little warning. Or maybe what they'll do is they'll poison their own household. They'll actually say, oh, this guy came to visit. So everyone, oh my word, what do you guys think about this guy? What do you think about this guy? Here, eat this. I made this for everyone. And there's a special herb that they discovered, that they implanted into the food. And the herb actually doesn't make people sick. It just does something to their emotions. And you actually just give them something, you prime them. Look, it doesn't have to be food, it can be anything. It can just be discussion, it can just the food of discussion, the food of talking, the food of language, the food of introduction, the food of semantics, the food for thought. Never mind the food of the stomach, the food for thought. Let's talk about this person, let's gossip, let's say what there is to say about this person, let's invent the context that we should be our context of our understanding of the situation. Let's concoct. And there are druids out there. There are druids that are protecting their group. They are protecting their little pool of karma. Their little pool of they're a big fish in a small pond, you know. And maybe that's their excuse is, oh, we need to get rid of this other fish because he thinks he's a big fish in a small pond. And he wants to come and join our pond. You know, fuck off. You know, we don't need a big fish in a small pond kind of guy here. You know, so who's the big fish in the small pond when everyone's just a big fish in a small pond in your mind? In your mind. do some people have the mind in which there aren't just big fish and small ponds? There is actually uh, one fish. I don't know. That's a bit of a mixed metaphor, but I mean, I think you should be able to see what I mean by it. Um, that in some sense there is a zero-sum pie. You either have it or you don't. But all for one and one for all, the Three Musketeers. What is the one? And then we begin the movie. That's sort of the prelude to the Matrix movies. Anyway, so it's hard to talk about this in pure story, but there are druids out there and they'll poison you. So watch the fuck out. I guess is that maybe the issue. Anyway, so I think that is a type of Metatype 13. The feeling druids. And you have to worry because they give themselves license to do things. They give themselves license to be the hands of time. They are the fathers of time. They are Kronos. And what did Kronos do? What was the elder god Kronos? What did he do? Sorry, I'm saying the Latin. In Greek, it's Uranus. Uranus ate his own children. He would have eaten Zeus even, but Zeus was protected by his mother by being flung into nature, and he was suckled on the great ram, Amalthea, the beast of the earth, suckled on the divine or earthly goat's milk or ram milk or anyway. Interesting. Let me not talk too much about the Greek pantheon, but it gives a metaphorical, does give a metaphorical insight into at least modeling some of these things. I mean, there is something in the soul that inclines us to Greek, and that might as well be in Scripture in some sense, I think, because, well, first of all, if we read Revelations, it even says, when it refers to the sea, it refers to death and Hades, in terms of the dead that are locked up in the sea. It actually uses the Greek god Hades. But also, discern the spirits, try the spirits whether they are of God. And that means that we are inclined to mystery, because if we're not inclined to mystery, how will the mystery of God be finished when it should be finished, according to the voice of the seventh angel? Anyway, okay, so there's some scriptural evidence for my point, perhaps some other evidences for some other people there, that is quite sadly has to be centered around rebuking retards, because that's the problem. When your friends are retards, you're going to get it on you. I mean, even children as young as 6 years old know this. What do they call it? They call it cooties. Oh, you've gotten cooties. Oh, now you can't be friends with someone with cooties, because then you'll catch it. What am I saying different to what an intelligent 6-year-old can see, although perhaps doesn't have better way of languaging it, which is a bit problematic as well, because when you think that you understand something that you can't exactly language, because I mean, I have languaging problems, but I can get there. I can fucking get there. Okay, so you can call me, maybe you can say that I sound a bit retarded. I'll accept that. It's certainly true, certainly in some contexts. But please, just be more serious, be more patient, be more careful, because otherwise you will be on. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to produce a warning here. It's difficult because I can't think of a good metaphor here now. But essentially, you do have to watch out because I'm fucking sharp, and I'm fucking fast. Uh, and you think that you were leading me down the garden trail, but you were essentially setting up your own noose. Um, and that's because when I judge someone, I fully empathize with them, and I mean that. And I actually even emulate me being in the same position as them, which is why I believe that I fully know exactly the distortion that they are beset by. And really, there is a sinful disposition which is, well, quite frankly, it at the very least has to be managed, pragmatically. Obviously, spiritually, there's no limit as to what will come out of my mouth. Um, I'm very versatile that way. Uh, and you have to be careful because what I say will be true. Um, Obviously, it won't be true for the people who are rejecting it, goes without saying. Um, and I would just say that that does not go without spiritual consequence, but obviously, that is something that other people will just say is an argument that I'm making. Um, and, it's a free country, we can agree to disagree. Um, Obviously, I will take extreme issue with someone who tries to pollute my blood and inject me under the guise of diagnoses. That's obviously very. This is where doctors are, in the legal world, are very dangerous people potentially. It can be very problematic, especially when one has doctors, or at least on record, that it is recorded that one has doctors that are capable of producing, let's say, secret uh, lesson plans and treatment schedules and conspiracies of poisoning. Um, it's interesting. I mean, you could say this is the structural recapitulation of perhaps the druidic function that we have inherited from the worldly way. You know, I mean, is it too hard to demand fucking informed consent? At least, especially when people are capable. I mean, I guess the point is that I think that has fallen by the wayside because people have gotten so stupid and retarded in general that doctors don't even try to give informed consent. Probably also because they don't even understand what it is that they're peddling, because they're little better than quacks in a lot of ways, but they do know that some of their treatments are effective. So that's how they excuse it to themselves, is that, somehow the field is actually devoid of real understanding and knowledge, but it's effective. So it kind of gets away with itself, and we live in this strange world where many patients looking on the internet and reading up things can know more about their conditions than their own doctors, even though their doctors have at their fingertips perhaps a view as to what the. No, I mean, I always thought that an honest doctor would properly research things before. Obviously, if there's triage and there's some kind of immediate measure to be done that's better safe than sorry, then obviously do the triage and the immediate attention to the matter. But doctors that don't properly research and ascertain in this particular presentation of these symptoms what the optimum kind of course of treatment would be, and what the holistic kind of treatment is, I guess it's like anything, the people that have various different, intellects, and it's interesting. I mean, I guess though, maybe we have lived in a world now where people are at least more honest at not disguising the quality of their service. So I wonder if the world has actually gotten better, because now at least, let's say, the standards have dropped so low, and people are so blunt and honest about their, so when you go to someone and now they are honest about their oh no, now I have to import some kind of sexual metaphor here of confusion. When someone is living out an old moment of time, that they are sort of demonically a subsidiary of that energy, of that experience that they have been concocting and mixing up and distilling and propagating. In order to sort of conserve the essence of that fathering time and space and moment that they are still shocked in, or still, it interrupted them, it interrupted their internal locus of control, and then they lived in association to that external locus of condition, which they are anchored to relating with in their subsequent life stream, which has been filtered by that set of conditions that either led up to that event, or that, I'm basically describing Scientology engram theory, and with maybe some small description of kind of messed matter, energy, space, and time, kind of ways of ways of measuring the influence, the forms or the subjects, the categorical subject matter over which that structure, whatever you want to call it, that complex or that event, or how it operates in the mind as a mechanism, the categories over which your orientation are distorted. Your relationship to matter, energy, space, and time, or your understanding of matter, energy, space, and time, which then will also have a knock-on effect on your responsibility, control, and knowledge of reality. Anyway, it's interesting because I do think that our own pain in this way is useful. In terms of, let's say, the depth of deviation. That one has suffered in the pursuit of these sidetracked distortions that have structurally framed our misadventures, if I can put it like that in a very abstract and technical way, but in a kind of overview, therefore. So I've just framed it now in an overview, so that's a little bit, you have to be a little bit careful when one creates an overview, when one translates what one is saying into an overview. Suddenly now we are dealing with an amoral framing, so we have to be very careful that whatever conclusion is now precipitated must be independently verified and processed by a different moral framing that is properly grounded in the internal locus of control, etc., etc. But you know, essentially, does one trust oneself, I guess, is the overarching question. To be able to hold responsibility, knowledge, and control, which, you know, and that is an independent question of if you're worthy of that trust, if you're actually capable of understanding. Because you might not be capable of understanding because you're still in the matrix, you're still subsumed by the filtering process, by the charge in your bank, to use Scientology words here, in the charge in your memory bank, which is essentially, in some totality, it is the mechanism of your reactive mind. Or rather, it is the mechanism that is the reactive mind, in whatever complex, you know, structure that it is constituted of. Sorry, I'm just playing with technical ways of trying to finish the sentence into, let's say, a nice round description, but there is, you know, like, when does that ever end? You know, when is the description descriptive enough? You know, it's sort of, you know, that's a worldly question. So, you know, that's why I even torture myself a bit every time I talk about it, because I'm so entrained to wanting to be a very clear teacher in all the nuance needed to overcome people's, let's say, to preempt people's self misleading tendency, which might be, you know, a complication of these internally held charges. Yeah. You know, on the categories of matter, energy, space, and time, which then fuck with your understanding, which then fuck with your trust of knowledge, control, and responsibility. And that last one is a real doozy, because, you know, you might actually have proper trust in those things, but you don't have access to them because of, let's say, malformations in your internal locus of control. Anyway, okay, I think I've taught something in this recording, so maybe this was supposed to be a personal log. You know, see, it's weird. I have to. It seems that I'm only capable of processing myself if I think that I'm teaching somebody else. I mean, what kind of fuck up thing is that? And that's actually weird. I think that's weird, and I think that's partly a consequence of the fact that I do actually really believe. I'm not saying that I'm correct in this belief, but I do honestly believe. Obviously, I don't know if I'm correct or not. I might be wrong. I don't believe I'm wrong, obviously. There's just a technical point to get the fuck over it. You know, stop being a retard. That I only generated my false ego complex in order to teach other people how to overcome theirs. And therefore, because that was my purpose in developing my false ego complex, and because it was even designed in order to collect reactive circuitry in such a way that I could generate an I'm trying to make up a word here, over scope, so that I could sort of scope out everybody else's variant of the same reactive circuitry. So that as I developed my own reactive circuitry, my reactive circuitry was kind of built in the image of a mirror, of being able to reflect everybody else's. So when I try to process my own shit, I can't even process it out unless I'm recording it as a fucking teaching aid for somebody else. You know, I guess maybe somehow I worked out strategically when I was 5 years old that if I use the scripture in the Bible that says, you know, like it's almost like a prophecy that, you know, about someone who actually achieves Christ consciousness, which is described in Ephesians chapter 4, but also in combination with, I think, something in Corinthians that talks about, you know, and it's actually in John. It's in 1 John chapter 5, I think. It says like, and you know, and we will know him because he. Oh man, I can't even. I'll screw it up. Let me just actually read it out. You know, but basically, you know, I can't remember all this technical grammatical shit. No, it's actually not in 1 John chapter 5, I think. Let me just try to search for it. I'm sure I can find it on the search. It's probably in a few Gospels. I can't find it, I think. But it's, you know, it's a famous scripture. It's a well-known scripture that says, you know, as he is in the world, we will know. It is in John somewhere. And this is embarrassing. Anyway, let me try and find it. It'll just take me a while. I mean, there are lots of things in John that are also kind of very similar to this, but I just want to find this exact scripture. It's gonna hurt me that I can't find it quickly. As he is in, I'm sure. Mess up my typing. Oh, here we go. It's 1 John chapter. Oh, it is chapter 4. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There's the he again. The understanding. So that's what, you know, because as he is, so are we in the world. And I, as a young, even as a child of 5, I could strategically understand that. Because as he is, so are we in this world. So I had to create a mind I had to create a mind to overcome and integrate my own false ego complex. So, you know, you have to, you know, if you want to understand something, you have to, some point you have to work out what the component parts of it are, and you have to work out how those component parts should work together. So, you know, to put this in, you know, you have to break the remote control to see all the buttons and all the components inside of it, and then you have to pray to God that you can put it back together, and that you can work out how to put it back together, and that you have the skill to put it back together, which is, you know, something that you can only pray to God for in some sense, with faith, and do that. And a growth of faith as you do that and embark on doing that. So as he is, so are we in this world. So I had to create a false ego complex that was capable of contrasting to we in this world. So I had to create an everyman fucking Swiss Army knife false ego complex. Anyway, a bit of a strange thing for a 5-year-old to ideate over, but anyway. I guess I had nothing better to do. Well, actually, I did actually want to do other things. I wanted to do many other things, but I felt that this was a duty that I had to fulfill. So I felt like I was fucked a bit. It was kind of perhaps I shouldn't say that out loud in public. Perhaps it's a bit profane. But it would have been nice if somebody else had done it before me. Is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to sound like an ingrate here. Like I'm not happy to be alive. But I mean, I do just want to say that I'm 35 years old, turning 36 soon, and I've been working at this since I was 5 years old. And in fact, I did other things before that, but at least the other things that I did before that were more proper in my view. When I was doing stuff at 2 years old, I was also trying to help out the world in the ways that I could see that the world needed help. But at least I did that without having to fuck myself over. Having to create a false ego complex, it's not the nicest thing in the world for a 5-year-old to have to engineer their own insanity and pathology in order to help other people. It's not the nicest thing for a little child to have to do. I mean, I can feel sorry for myself as a little child. I'm sorry, I can actually do that. Obviously I did it, so I didn't think that it was something not worth doing. It's just, it would have been nice if somebody else had done it so I didn't have to, is all I'm basically saying. I'm not trying to be resentful of it, but, that's the way the cookie crumbles, as they say, and it's just that, I think I could have done a whole lot of other cool things, like I could have invented immortality. I'm pretty sure I could have done that by now. Easily. I could have invented lots of things, I think. I mean, I guess, this sounds like the grandiose ravings of a madman, but, I never really learnt biology. I know stuff about biology, but, and I've always helped other people do their research because I'm very intelligent and I have a lot of fluid intelligence. So when someone asks me questions, I can ask them questions and then they can tell me the answers if they know them, and then I can tell them what the next question should be. And so I'm very good at administering things that I don't even have speciality over. I'm actually very good at telling people what to do, essentially, or at least working with them. Obviously, you need some kind of mutual respect to get that kind of working relationship right. But I mean, I've helped many academics and researchers, and I'm very good at solving practical problems, if I do say so myself. I mean, maybe other people are more specialized to being able to optimize other things. I'm a very good general optimizer, which also makes me very dangerous because I can go in there and innovate a whole industry to the point at which that the person who wanted me to look at the thing is now out of business because I've seen a way that actually evaporates their whole niche, so I'm dangerous in that way, that I can sort of move markets with just by technology, But I think that I would be very good at helping generate technology. But obviously I'm not really that good at it because I've focused on psychology my whole fucking life. Which has been personally taxing for me because it's been lonely. Because me having to do this has meant that my personal life has been completely fucked over. I mean, I do resent that, because it's not nice to be complicated for other people, because then, you have to be avoidant in order to mitigate the damage. Because, when one has a toxic soul, because one is busy, I mean, I guess that's the same as, it's the same as other people, you make sacrifices for one's profession, for one's work. It's weird that my profession is professing the faith and here I am complaining on a recording. It's not nice to hear that. But, I mean, look, I am complaining about it in a technical way, I think. I'm just counting the cost. Well, no, what am I trying to do? I'm just trying to understand where I am so I can work out how to fix I was listening to this wonderful little video by Dr. Romini. I can never. I'm so bad at pronouncing some people's names. About avoidant personality disorder, and I clicked on the link to see the full video lecture, but it didn't. The link was like a bad link. It didn't work. But I guess I know it's probably a paid service to get into that, which I probably don't have the money for anyway at the moment. But anyway, yeah, but I guess that irks me a little bit, you know, that might be something that'll help me out, just in terms of navigating what my problems are, what my social problems are, because I certainly have social problems. Anyway. Well, no, I have money problems, I would say. If I just had money, I think I would have much less problems, but you see, a lot of people can say that, so it's a bit unseemly to hear me say that, I guess. But there's also been a thing that, you know, I've kept myself, I think, artificially poor in order to do my work and optimize my work. And perhaps a bit afraid that if I start accessing money, that someone's going to assassinate me, because the world is a jealous and envious kind of place. But anyway, but it would also perhaps allow me to be more effective at being more efficacious, because I do think that I'm a very fruitful person. It's just that I don't have the resource base to be fruitful with, in some sense, you know. Some people suffer because they are very bad at responsibility, so the more power you give them, the more self-destructive or malevolent, or potentially malevolent, or just chaotic the world becomes more chaotic, because people who are irresponsible wield power. I mean, it's just a truism, right? Whereas some people suffer because there's a Herodotus quote. I think this Herodotus quote really affected me in the brain. I've now got this despairing brainworm, you see. I'm complaining like a wench, you know, like a little gossiping maiden. Sorry, I'm trying to think. What are the maidens that, you know, are always sort of? Sorry, I'm trying to think of a traditional term for, like, you know, like a housekeeper, but like the woman of the house that is doing all the chores and things. Anyway, it's a Herodotus quote. Nothing. So I'm not going to write the negative word, because the phrase where it's something like, there's nothing so sad but someone who, I can't remember what it is. It's something like someone who knows the answers to all the questions but can't actually, no one asks them the answers because they look poor, or something like that. That was basically what it meant in the context of my life, but it was phrased very nicely. Nothing so terrible as... I mean, obviously he didn't speak English, he spoke Greek, so someone obviously translated this quote. And that's why I wish I could learn Greek. It would be so cool to know some of the stuff in the original. Or maybe, I mean, I guess I don't know what it would be like. Of all men's misery, the bitterness is this, to know so much and to have control over nothing. That's the Herodotus quote. Man, there's something about... I want to put that on a fucking t-shirt. I want to put that on a fucking t-shirt. You know, there's something about the current situation. You know, I would put this in a moral context, you know, because the problem is that, you know, you can generalize this into politics and say, you know, this is why the country is so fucked up, is because there are so many people who are running this backwards, or doing the inverse of this. They know so little in terms of morality, and they have control over everything. You know, that's the problem with democracy, I guess, is that people who have a kind of negative moral knowledge are given power over things, so that, you know, control. Anyway, but I mean, this is also tragic in itself, in some sense. Of all miseries, the bitterness is this. Of all men's miseries, the bitterest is this. Man, bitterest. That's a fucking word if there was one. The bitterest. The bitterest. What is a bitterest? That almost even sounds like a Greek. That sounds like, Cerberus. The bitterest is that like a the bitterest? I mean, that sounds like a noun. I mean, it is in the form of bitterer. To be bitterer than somebody else, and then to be the bitterest is a fucking. That's like a polytheistic term. That is actually a polytheistic term because if you think about, there must be some person who is the bitterest. Quantitatively speaking, living. Actually, well, you see, that's the thing. Is there any works? Do you explode time when you think about things in that sense? Is there such a thing as the bitterest? Is that a fake idea? I wonder if that's a fundamentally imaginative concept. I don't think, because who's to judge who is the bitterest? Obviously this is an opinion. The whole point of this quote is that it's just a little opinion. And opinions are problematic because, and I mean this in the strict philosophical sense of the word, but anyway, now I'm pontificating into philosophy. But you see, this is how you can dig yourself out of a hole with intellectualism. I mean, I'm just showing how, so I can say that for me, this opinion somewhat rings true for me right now. I fucking hope it won't always ring true. I hope I can forget this little quote because it's a demon of a quote to live under. Fuck, if I have to walk around with a shirt with this on my shirt, it's going to make me a bitterer person. It's going to make me a bitterer person at the very least, walking around. Or in fact, maybe that'll be the exorcism of how bitter I am about the quote. Is that if I walk around with it on my chest, then maybe it'll undo it. Maybe it'll be like I'll be uncasting the spell of this quote on the world by making it available for people to read and to think. But it's also a kind of grandiose thing to walk around, isn't it? Like saying, there's people who walk around with shirts on them that says, I have a big dick. Or there are a whole lot of shirts like that when I was a teenager. They didn't actually say, I have a big dick, but they just said something else that basically implied that. That was like one of the most risque things that one of the teenagers wore. Because I went to a private school in which everyone wore their own clothes, and then because someone wore that shirt, that implied that it was like some kind of clever quote that was obviously making an implicit sexual reference, but it was slightly, it was obviously not exactly explicit, but it was tacit. That means it was implied. Then because of that, we actually changed the dress code of the school, and everyone had to wear a shirt that was actually a uniform shirt. But the uniform shirt was a plain shirt that had one pocket square, and there were like 4 different colors, or 5 different colors. So, there was actually a uniform that was imposed. So everyone could wear their own pants, and there were some vague restrictions for the pants, like that you could basically wear whatever you wanted as long as it was smart. And then the girls had this whole thing because, it was like, I think I don't know, because if a girl wants to wear a dress, and then the dress has to be at least a certain height, but most people didn't wear dresses anyway. But, it's interesting because, if you have a uniform t-shirt, but you don't have a uniform, I think the girls had like a V-neck, and the men could have whatever neck they wanted, but I think the men usually had round neck t-shirts, and the girls I think only had V-necks, so because of the different bodies, between the sexual dimorphism in our species, it's interesting, the politics, the diplomacy, the world, the ideas, the food for thinking, the poisons, the druids, you're going to muscle in on somebody else's druid game, and then you're gonna sook with them. That's the word that in the common slang that means you're provoking them. You are instigating a fight. That's what suk means. Suk actually just means seek, I believe, in Dutch or Afrikaans, or I don't actually know if it's it might be from. There are some Afrikaans words that are taken from African language, or at least are a mix of African or sometimes also Indonesian. Afrikaans is mostly Dutch. It's a little bit of German. It takes a lot from other languages as well, but it just kind of influences the core root, which was Dutch and German mostly. But they call it a Kombees language. So basically, it's the Dutch language which was made into a Dutch German dialect that was evolved further into incorporating other people's languages, because other people would have words. And so they call it a Kombees language, which means a kitchen language, because it was a language that was evolved in kitchens. It was cooked up by people who shared kitchens, because in the olden days, many people kitchens were much bigger, and they were centers of a lot of conversation. Women would be working in kitchens because many places would give you food, because there wasn't this pre-packaged food. Everything was cooked in a kitchen, and so if workplaces had kitchens, everything had a kitchen attached to it, because we didn't have this sort of I guess supermarkets were still a bit not in terms of how they package pre-made, pre-ready food. There was much less sort of pre-ready food stuff on the shelf. Everything was cooked up generally. Weirdly, in a semi-commercial way that was sort of household commerce hybridized. Anyway, it's interesting how little facets like that perhaps have changed our history, and also the evolution of language, perhaps. Sorry, I mean, how the hell did I get to that conclusion? That's a very tentatively splotchy and sporadic kind of concoction of a way to come up to finish I just want to finish the story now so I can stop the recording. I think I'm now talking and rambling a complete load of bullshit now. But anyway, perhaps that's what happens when one indulges in self-pity. But I did believe I was doing it for a purpose. I was looking for a way out. So I do have this feeling that I don't have enough control, I don't have enough responsibility, I don't have enough resources to administer over, which makes me a little bit anxious or angsty, or feel hard done by, because I can't sell my wares, because also the things that I have to sell are 30 years worth of psychological research, which quite frankly I don't want to sell. It's a bit unsavory to me. I kind of want to put it on Amazon. I want to self-publish it as an Amazon bookstore, or just have it on my YouTube. But obviously the problem is that I want it to be more accessible, but I don't exactly have the skill to turn it into a book myself, or I don't have the energy or the time, because it's also not exactly finished as well, so it's not perfectly ripe yet. I haven't dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, so I do feel lazy, but I'm also taking it a little bit easy because I've punished myself. I mean, you should see what my physical state is, like my posture is fucked. I'm trying to take care of myself a little bit more than I used to, because, I'm also getting, I mean, I've been told that for my age, I don't look my age. I look much younger than my age. I don't know if that's true or not, but, you probably can't tell. In 5 years' time, you'll probably be able to tell if I'm aging well or not. Some people, they age suddenly, they reach a certain age and suddenly they look 10 years older than they did the year before, or something like that. Although, I think that I'm probably, because, a lot of it has to do probably with your psychology and your brain health and stuff like that. Because a lot of that is connected to your endocrine system. So although I do have lots of problems they're like mechanical problems that need to be fixed by incremental. I mean, I've been going to a physio that has finally been fixing a lot of my problems. Although obviously, when you change your body alignment, it's a bit violent, because all of the habitual things that you're changing now has to create like a new symphony of it's tumultuous, or what's the word? It's that's not the right word exactly, but it's oh my word, evolution, is not always smooth. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's a combination of fast and slow in a strange concurrence or cacophony of interweaved orientations and influences. Anyway, it's so hard to usually my voice. I need to stop this recording. What I'm doing to my over talking. I want to go find something nice to drink. I'll have to think about that. I know what I want to drink. I just can't afford it right now. And they don't sell it in big enough bottles. There's this non-alcoholic Indian Pale Ale, and it tastes amazing, but they only sell it in 340 milliliter bottles. It's utterly, it actually hurts my feelings that they won't sell it. They will sell it to you in a keg, but that's very expensive. I want them to sell a keg's worth of volume to me in quartz bottles. I want it in 110, like a real quartz, not the 750 milliliters. I want the 110, 1100 milliliter bottles, the real quartz size. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I want. Maybe if I get that, I won't be happy. But that's what I know that I want at the moment. But I'm trying to convince them to get the bottling, because they've got the equipment to bottle 340 milliliter bottles. They'd have to get new equipment, so I have to motivate them to do that. I was even thinking that what they should do, right, is instead of having to pay a keg deposit, they should sell people quartz bottles, which then they clean themselves, and they do it as like sell me 33 quartz bottles, and I'll pay some premium price, like some premium upfront price. Like I'll buy the crates and the quartz bottles that come packaged in these plastic crates, sell that to me for 1,200 rand, which is an exorbitant price for empty bottles. And then part of that is that when I bring it back to them, they clean it with water for free, and they fill it up and they bottle it. So instead of me paying a deposit for a keg, they do this. They have to fiddle around with these bottles, these big bottles. And obviously this changes their business model, because that stops them from being a kind of boutique seller of beer to a mass producer, to volume sales. It pisses me off that people are trying to sell boutique items instead of trying to go for the volume sale. It's like they don't believe in their product, or they don't believe that their product, or they think people will get sick of their product. I don't know, maybe I would get sick of it if I drank as much as I want to drink of it. This is the thing. Maybe they sell you just enough that you can kind of not get your full taste of it. I like doing that. I like consuming something enough that I actually feel like I don't want more of it, because then I feel like I know that I've optimized whatever nutrient was inside of it. I try to reach the bottleneck. That's how I experimentally consume things. And actually, I have done that. When I've gotten access to money, I have done that.
and I've actually even influenced whole industries. I would give the example, but my voice is a bit tired. But that was also when I had access to a lot of money. So it was actually also a huge waste of money, but it actually did have a huge knock-on effect by it produce. Because you see, a lot of things could be mass-produced, but no one ever makes them available to the market because there isn't a market for them. And then you have a catch-22, is you have people who want to put in orders, but because it's not on the market, they can't order it. And so people would use an item, but no one is producing it. So someone at some point has to put in a big order, then everyone reacts to it and starts producing it, and the cost comes down because you need competition to make the cost come down. So it's just, you need an initiating order that actually creates a reorientation of the market, you know. And I understand things like that, so I actually put money into that when I have access to money. And I think it is the kind of like the rising tide that raises all keels. But some people don't appreciate that about me, I guess. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I was being a bit crazy and impulsive, I guess. But it did have a good knock-on effect. But in some sense, it's weird because I did also. It's not as if that I lucked into the knock-on effect. I think sometimes I have seemingly lucked into the knock-on effect that had a general positive outcome. Because sometimes things that I've done have also had a general negative outcome, but that general negative outcome was also catalytic for something else that was better, you know. So that's the sort of the strange kind of. You know, we are often dealing in issues where we don't have full knowledge. But, you know, as they say, hindsight is perfect, you know. So this is the sort of something could be said of an eternal mystery of some of these things. But, you know, this is also why control and power distribution is gated, and it is properly gated, because if bad people, irresponsible people do have power, and they haven't put in, because I mean, although I have acted rashly, I would say, and impulsively, as I've just said, it's within a certain framework. I have kind of weird ethical themes of framing my own actions, where I know that there will be, let's say, a positive outcome. And when I know when I'm acting in a situation where I don't know what the consequence is, I do reserve judgment against myself. The problem is that in the amoral framing of reserving judgment, you are perhaps open to anything and everything, and then you have to kind of make a utilitarian. You're locked into making a utilitarian calculation at some point. And at some point, utilitarian calculations are limited because you can't create utilitarian calculations unless you have stable counterfactuals to contrast them against, which is, roughly speaking, impossible. So there is a calculation problem in utilitarianism, because everything is not complicated or simple, it's also complex. And so if you're dealing in a complex situation, forgive them, for they know not what they do, you know. Now, I'm fine with offering people forgiveness, but they also have to know what the fuck they've done wrong at some point. If there is knowledge that they are avoiding on purpose in order to preserve their own nescience, in order to conserve their own self-righteousness, that is still ongoing from that, what should be a red flag of, well, judgment is reserved. They don't see it themselves that the judgment has been reserved. Instead, they see it that, well, they're still on their way. They're still in the same experiment. They're still in the same commission. They're still acting in the same vogue.
So they don't even realize that they've got looming judgment forming against them, and they're not fucking interested. They're not intellectually honest enough and humble enough. So they can't even be reprimanded or rebuked because they're not repentant, because they, in their view, they haven't done anything wrong, and they're not even interested in understanding what it is that they might be doing wrong. So really, fuck them. They're dangerous fucking people. They're reprobates. The sullen, the insolent, and the indolent. When you're all three of those things, fuck, man. Fuck you. You're a piece of shit. You're a moral piece of shit. You are scum. Householders through and through, all the world over. What do they just want to do? They just want to be dignified in their indignation, of their self-indignation. I'm using the word incorrectly there, aren't I? No, or does, when you're indignant, when I guess, am I adding more description now? If you're sullen and insolent and indolent and you're indignant, you're in a class of your own in terms of being a miscreant. You are in a league of your own. You are a Luciferian synagogue of Satan unto yourself. Putting cheese in your own ears so that you can only hear what your own milk is. You're fucking addicted to mother's milk. You're some kind of. You think that you are. You're acting like a woman. You think you're the lady of the night that does no wrong, and that why aren't the chivalrous knights bowing to you and conceding to your whim and to your wishes and to your concerns and your the world revolves around you. The world should be revolved around protecting your honor. Juvenile sympathy, entitled, demanding, sort of completely imprinted on the feminine whore as the kind of completely rationalized with sexual immorality, essentially, to use the metaphor of the confused electromagnetism. You're going to develop your own electromagnetism, and never mind, that other people, you're not going to understand the other electric devices in the works. You're not going to understand the other magnets in the work. You don't know the first thing about magnetism, but your electromagnetism, we should all conform to your field, to your newly concocted field that you cooked up in your own little imagination because you learned how to do a discursive essay in school by probably some other reprobate, some other false teacher, or maybe you're just a sullen, insolent, and indolent child raised by other immature people that you essentially normalized as being mature, and so the rest of the world. This is good enough for the rest of the world to speak in an amoral way, to speculate academically in public without the authenticity or the honesty of authentic, declaration of what you don't know, or what your moral, what your actual authentic moral view is on something, that you speak like a lawyer or something. Anyway, perhaps this is turning more into an interpersonal rebuke for someone that I had the distaste of crossing lines with. But sadly it's a common motif. In some sense, this is someone who has just found a way to optimize the world, or something like that, or sorry, they've naturalized the world, so they're spiritually dead. Well, I mean, obviously they can seemingly be very proactive and whatever, but I mean, thus the phrase synagogue of Satan and Luciferian. But anyway, um, yeah, there's an insensitivity to faith there. It's quite disgusting. It's like they profess an understanding that is beyond faith and that penetrates faith. It's really quite deplorable. It's really a kind of agnostic, and sort of an agnostic sort of it's an agnostic sort of polytheism. It's both agnostic and polytheistic, I would submit. So it's very dangerous because it's like it can always it can chimerically disguise itself. It can reconfigure itself. It's like the Tokoloshi, in terms of the myth of it being able to change its form. Um, it's very interesting how a lot of the traditional African animism uh, is very baseline, profoundly integrated into spiritual understanding. Anyway, this is why they call South Africa in the geo. What's it called? I don't know what they're called. I can't remember now. The ley line maps. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the ley line maps. When I was young and I was, I could say, experimenting or researching into different spiritual ideas and things like that. There are these ley line maps, and then people tell you, when all the ley lines intersect at certain places, then that's kind of a special place, and that there are centers in the world where the ley lines crisscross. And South Africa is the earth center of the world, I was told, which is like that there are four main centers in the world, and one of them is South Africa, or specifically kind of where I live. It's Table Mountain, I believe, or something like that. I don't know if I believe that stuff. I mean, it's sort of, maybe it's just a weird sort of coincidence. That's what happens if you plot all the little beautiful things in the world, all the little interesting, little if you plot all the little, Stonehenges and the pyramids of Giza and all that shit, right? Just plot it all around, and then you just draw lines connecting one to the other, right? And then you just see where all the lines end up crossing over the world, So you just take everyone who believes in a religious place, you plot all of those places all over the world, right? And then you just draw lines connecting each one of them, and then you see if there are lines that keep on where they all intersect or something like that. And then, it's a weird methodology, It's like, why the fuck would that matter? That there's a certain idea that there's a kind of osmotic, sacred interpenetration of religious iconography or something like that. It's a very convoluted methodology to think that, what water can this really hold? I mean, it's a really abstract metaphorical extrapolation. So I mean, I never really, I'm just remembering it now, and I'm just thinking about it now and mentioning it now, but it's very obscure. It's a very obscure. I'm not saying that I believe in it or that I even don't believe in it. I just think that it's kind of bullshit. So I just wanted to mention it as I was even referring to it. That it's a weird coincidence, but maybe that's all based on my own grandiosity, though. Is it just a coincidence that these things crisscross where I live? Weird. Or maybe it's just another way of saying that, the place where I live seems magical because we have, like, they call it God's Mountain, It's called Table Mountain because it's a mountain that is fucking looks magical because, like, who else has like a flat mountain? Like you usually don't see big mountains that look like a laser beam has like cut off the top of them, you know? It's like, what the fuck happened here? Like, what other mountain looks so unnatural? What other huge mountain looks so strangely, you know, like it was maybe crafted by an ancient civilization, or that it was, you know, I mean, have you ever seen the top of Table Mountain? You know, people that believe in portals and stuff like that, they're like, you know, what the fuck went on here, you know, a million years ago? What other civilization, you know, used this place or something? You know, like what was what went on up here, you know, in our ancestral history or something. You know, there are plants on Table Mountain that are plants that existed before the Ice Age. There are plants around Table Mountain. The Fynbos Kingdom is the oldest plant kingdom in the world. It only exists where I live. Like literally, even the other provinces in my country don't have the Fynbos Kingdom. It's the only plant kingdom that predates the Ice Age, and it only exists where I live, in this tiny little place on the map. And it has more species than all the other plant kingdoms put together, I've been told. Maybe that sounds a bit like a tall tale, because we don't know all the species in the Amazon. But, you know, you see the plants here. I mean, I can take a picture of a plant in my garden right now that's a Fynbos. And you will never see a plant like this anywhere else in the world. It looks like a dinosaur could be eating that plant. It looks like the same plant that a dinosaur would eat. It's like, you know, you see it in actually, you don't even, it looks like an alien plant. Its leaves are like alien. Maybe I feel like I should take a picture of it now and use it as the the picture of this recording. Anyway, you know, so maybe it's not me that's special. It's just the place is special. You know, it's weirdly, naturally, it's the oldest place in the world. In I submit, because of the plant stuff. You know, this where I live is the only place that essentially, maybe, you know, like this is the only place that kind of survived the flood, or survived this mountain or something like that. Was one of the mountains that weren't overcome, maybe in Noah's flood, maybe, or something about the Ice Age just didn't reach here. I don't know, something like that. Something that happened to the world didn't happen to this little tiny place that was safe, it would seem. Anyway. I've always wanted to build a civilization on the escarpment, because I believe that that is the safest place in the world, because it's so high above sea level. You know, in all the apocalypse movies, they always make these giant ships, and where they take the ships after the planet is flooded is they go to the South African escarpment, because it's sort of the only part of the world that's not covered by, when everything else turns to water or something. But anyway, I don't think it's I mean, I don't even believe in trying to escape a flood. I think that we should actually be trying to replace the seas with fertile land. We should drain the Mediterranean, and we should put that seawater into the water cycle by essentially creating the Sahara Desert, turning that into a forest, and finding a new way to control the weather, which I do think that the technology that I've already got in my head is capable of doing it. You just need also to add a technology of seeding clouds, because also if you remove the Sahara Desert, I think my friend told me that that produces a problem, because the Sahara Desert actually causes rain in the Amazon rainforest. It's the dust in the Sahara Desert that seeds the wind, and the wind that seeds the clouds. So maybe you might need a different mechanism to do that if you replace the Sahara Desert with a forest. But anyway, man, so anyway. I mean, perhaps they're just dreams. Because the thing that I want to use that controls the weather is also a very good source of making electricity. So it does both. It can control the weather. I believe it can. I might be wrong. I'd have to do the math. But just conceptually, though, it makes sense. And it should also be able to make electricity pretty abundantly. It does require some technological fiddling. I don't have the money to actually buy the materials to but conceptually it's good enough. The concept works. Obviously the design would have to be iterated slightly, but it's not even that complicated. But yeah, I think it should work anyway. So those anyway. I mean, those are the things that I would like to look at, I guess. But you see, all of these long-term big dreams.